have a photographic memory or be able to forget anything at will?
I don't really see the value in forgetting stuff. I guess it's like getting rid of embarrassing memories, perhaps trauma, all those sorts of things. Are there any like really cool powers from forgetting stuff?
Well, I thought the same thing as you, and so I wasn't going to do this question. And then I thought about another cool thing about forgetting things is that you could just watch your favorite series and read your favorite books over and over again and forget all the twists and the surprises and just enjoy them another time.
But you still remember that you liked those books, or have you forgotten all knowledge of those books? What's getting you to open them up again? How do you know that they're your favorite still?
You can forget anything at will, right? So you can just forget what the twist was, but kind of remember that you liked it or, the feelings that you had.
So you just basically keep watching Sixth Sense until you pick the twist. Like you just keep going on a marathon of the Sixth Sense, forget it, watch it again until eventually you can guess the twist. I don't know. Would you ever be able to if you fully forgot it all? Is there some sort of subconscious part of yourself that is growing and leveling up that you're not aware of?
I'm saying this more for the enjoyment of getting to enjoy like your favorite books and TV series that had twists that you loved. You can never enjoy those a second time to the same extent, right? So,
I mean, that's a cool angle. Like you definitely come up with a nice angle, but man, photographic memory is OP. Like it's just so amazing. The benefits to that is so cool. Like, I don't know, card counting. I mean, like, all sorts of things. All sorts of things. I couldn't come up with lots
of like card counting. Basically card counting. That's all you want it for.
He's going to go to the casino and play some blackjack.
It's just so many benefits.
Like my bridge play will definitely go through the roof as well. So that'll be good.
I think I'm in the other camp. I think there's things I would like to forget or things that I'd like to re-experience, like Zach was saying. Whereas photographic memory, you said there's lots of benefits, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd want photographic memory. I think some things are good to be left kind of like as they dissipate into your past and you forget about them and you don't remember exactly every detail. They become nostalgic. You remember what they were, not what they still are in your memory. So as like a real vivid memory. So I don't know. If it's at will to forget, I mean, how bad is your memory to begin with? It can't be that bad. So you're still going to, remember a lot of things. Maybe not photographically, but I don't know. I'm leaning the other way.
Interesting.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Shem. I think there's you could have traumatic memories or stuff like that you could, or embarrassing memories, as you said, Sam, or just general memories that when you think about them again, they're just not pleasant and you're like, oh man. So you'd have that angle and you have the angle that I said. Yeah, I don't know. I know that photographic memory is considered to be awesome and makes people seem really smart. But yeah, I can see a lot of attraction in being able to forget things at will as well. You get to choose what to forget. My only question would be on the side of bad memories. Did those bad memories, those bad events form your character? And by forgetting them, are you somehow affecting maybe the good character that you were able to make that, how can I reformulate that?
Like lessons learned kind of thing. You'll forget your failures.
Are you forgetting the lessons you learned? Are you forgetting the things that formed you into who you are, which is hopefully a positive thing, the positives that you took out of bad things that happened to you? Is forgetting those experiences erasing that character development that you went through?
There are a lot of legacy games I would happily play again if I could forget all about them and play them again and love them for the first time again. That's for sure. You
guys are living in a dystopia, though. It's like the Men in Black guys have just come up to you and wiped your memory. I don't know, man. Give me the truth. Give me reality. The annoying thing about photographic memory, though, will be having those kinds of conversations with people where you're reminiscing and someone's like, oh, it didn't happen that way. It happened this way. You'll get so frustrated at people who actually legitimately, they've got it wrong and they're retelling the story. I'm like, dude, that is not right. You have to kind of level up your grace for people who, alter the truth because that's exactly how they remembered it, even if that's not what occurred.
Yeah. Does that happen to you every time you hear your mum tell a story or something like that? Because
yeah, exactly. Yeah. The reason I say that with experience, not that I've got photographic memory, but when people make stuff up, I'm like, that it never happened that way. What the heck are you talking about?
That sounds like that game the other week with Zach and his brother. Oh, I won the first game. No, you didn't.
Yeah, exactly. And that went on about 3 minutes too long, that conversation, I think.
Thing is, I don't even remember that conversation. I just willfully forgot about it.
Clever.
My sister has forgotten this thing where when we were younger, she's my older sister, and she was of the age where she could be my babysitter. My parents go out and she babysitter. And she was babysitting other people as well. Like, it's just kind of like this pocket money thing. And I cottoned onto the fact that my parents were paying her because that's what you do for babysitters, you know? And so I was like, guys, to my parents, you know that she's powerless to control my behavior, right? Like, if I don't behave, she's not going to have a good time. This is not going to be good. So what I propose is that you pay me the same you pay her for me to behave, and then it'll all be fine. And that's legitimately what they did. Like, I fully blackmailed my parents, like, I just couldn't handle the fact that they were paying her to do nothing, like, to absolutely do nothing. And when my sister told me that she used to get paid to babysit me, like, recently, I had a laugh and I said, I know, but so did I.
Bro, you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I mean...
Card counting, blackmail. It's all good character stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Hey, I just saw an opportunity, you know? Saw an opportunity. That sibling rivalry thing, it goes back. It's very historic, you know. Welcome to the Lens and Veil podcast. Join Shem, Sam, and Zach as they dive into a designer-focused analysis of secret societies by S.J. Macdonald. So today we're talking about Secret Societies, a game designed by yours truly. It's a game played over 7 rounds where each player plays as a secret society vying for control of the Earth. We are bidding for control of various countries that come out in this deck. And we bid using our bid cards, and we get 2 every round. But the twist is that you can bid face up or face down with your bid cards, but you can only do 1 face down per round. So there is a little bit of a bluffing element to it. There's a lot of interaction. And the countries themselves will provide you with resources when you claim them. There are lots of different ways that you can score points. And these resources that the countries give you, you can invest into gaining more income each round, which will give you more money to be able to put in higher bids in future rounds. Or you can invest the population that you gain from these countries into unlocking these special powers on your player board, which sort of function like a little tech tree of all these different powers and abilities that you can use in the auction phase. Each game will play very differently every time. There are different conferences and other little abilities that players can get, as well as the different secret societies that each player plays as, will allow for a lot of different variability and a lot of fun, exciting moments for players.
Right. Thanks, Sam, for giving us an overview of your game, Secret Societies. Where did the original idea for this game come from?
So I've always loved geography. I don't know if you guys are in the same camp or not, but when I was a kid, I loved looking at atlases and maps and things like that. I loved trying to memorize capital cities and where countries were on the map, and also what their flags look like and things like that. I feel like when I was 12, I was really good at this. And now I have the same ability as when I was 12. Like, I haven't leveled up in any of my repertoire for like capital cities and stuff. I've just tried to maintain what I knew then, but you know, I could have leveled up even more. But this has always felt nostalgic to me, looking at the GDP and population and size of all these different countries of our Earth. It's just always been really exciting and really fun. Yeah, and there's so many different cultures and people groups represented on this relatively small planet of ours. And it's really amazing just to see the diversity. And that's why I'm drawn to geography. And I go to pub quizzes or trivia nights quite a bit. And it seems like there's a lot of other people that like geography too, because many of the teams will choose that round, the geography round, as their joker or their double points round. So there's a lot of people that enjoy this kind of thing. And it got me thinking that why aren't there many games that have geography in it? Yes, we have lots of games with maps of the world and things like that, but not games that showcase the real life stats of different countries, about the number of people they have, about how big the country is, what their GDP is, and things like that. And so I wanted to make a game where there would be country cards that players would draft, and based on those stats, they would get certain amounts of resources. So that's really the genesis for the game. And the draft ended up making the most sense to be an auction for these countries.
Yeah, so that was one of the most interesting things about the game that I first played, Sam. I think very early prototype was how the cards were based off actual stats, the size and population and stuff. So, which meant that these cards were in no way balanced, right? Like certain continents are far more populous than they are wealthy, and the other way around. So is that what led to the auction mechanism, like a way of making an interesting draft where players have ultimate control, essentially?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, if in a normal drafting game, like a card drafting game, like a Seven Wonders or a Blood Rage or something like that, you have to try to make the cards balanced-ish. Like not fully perfectly balanced, and they're not. There are some cards that are better than others, but they can't be like a factor of 2 in terms of strength different from each other. That is just too much because players can't really control as much as they would like in a drafting game. But with auctions, it allows you a lot more imbalance, I want to say, in the cards, in the randomness. And so the real stats of these countries just provided the numbers essentially for me. I had to do some kind of rounding and gamifying of the numbers a bit, but like it allowed me to play around with these massive imbalances. And so there could be countries, and there are in this world of ours, that are really small and they don't have many people and they don't have many resources. And so these countries will not provide as much for the players, just that that's the reality of the game. But that is quite interesting to work around with an auction. Well, if you can get it cheaply, then it's a great deal. But are you going to pay a lot for it? I don't know if you're going to. So auctions allow you to play with those kinds of imbalances that other styles of Euro games won't allow you to do. The other thing with auctions is that they are fantastic for interaction and engagement in the game. You can draft this thing that you want. If you really, really want it, you often can get it. But there's obviously problems with auctions as well. Some people, and actually a lot of people, say, I don't like auctions at all. I've heard this comment a lot. And I will challenge them with this game to say, actually, this might be the kind of auction game that you like. I'll be interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that as well. But one of the problems that I think people have with auctions is that they often struggle with the evaluation step, evaluating how much this thing is worth for me. And that can lead to a bit of anxiety for players. So with this game, I wanted to gamify it a little bit, where players can only place 2 or 3 bids per round when there's roughly 5 or 6 or more auctions available for the players. So you simply cannot be a big stack bully and claim everything. You can't win everything, because some other auction games you can bid on everything because the bids themselves are not a resource. It's just the money that you have. So in this game, you have to manage your bids as well as the coins that you use for buying countries. The bids are like a resource in themselves to only bid on the things that you most desire. It makes me laugh because some people might actually find a way to call the bidding system worker placement. I think they'll find a way to do it. I don't know about you guys, but there are some parallels.
You place
to
your
that.
worker on the country and you
Yeah.
place coins on top of your worker.
But the other thing that the bid cards do is they really put some upper bounds on what you could spend on a country. Like some auction games are super open. It's just the highest bid wins. But in this game, you can't possibly bid 100 coins. There's definite bounds to the restrictions of coins that you can put on the bid cards, as well as the values of the bid cards themselves. Normally, the highest a bid card would be 5, and then the additional coins would be 3. So you could get 8 coins on a bid. You could combine 2 bids, but you're never getting above like 15 for the value of a card. And so I think having those upper bounds there will help guide the players in assessing value of things and what they can afford, and to not get too overwhelmed by the pricing.
Yeah, I haven't been a huge fan of auction games previously. I do very much enjoy secret societies. I think I wonder if how much of that is because it's almost like an economic area control game. Like you're fighting with money to win things, right? Like the money may as well be soldiers you're deploying. So players who don't like high confrontation will probably dislike auctioning, and generally speaking. Even though it's not like you're fighting, you're not necessarily rolling dice, you're not doing that kind of thing, but you are bidding your resources to control something, to gain something. So that's probably why a lot of Care Bear Euro gamers, as most of us are, or some of us are at least, might be turned off by the more cutthroat style of auctions.
Right.
But like you said, with secret societies, there's cards creating that upper limit is great. And also I find that you've usually got 2 cards to bid with, usually. You can get third. And there's other ways you can try and like get more powers to have more options after the bidding, like to move a bid and stuff. But usually you can probably get one card and you're trying to get a set of the countries, the deeds that are available. So it's that thing of greed comes in as well. Like, do you just go for one thing you know you can get, pay the price that's probably above what you should, or are you going to go super greedy and try and get two things for cheap and risk getting nothing? And that's always for me like the hardest part of the game is like, I don't want to get nothing. I want to get at least one card and hopefully a second. So it's more like you're reacting to what's happening at the table with the auction, but it's also your own personal agency within that. It's for me, is the fun part of the auction where like I do have control. I do have decisions to make that actually mean a lot, very impactful. So it makes for a very tense but enjoyable experience, even for a more Eurocentric gamer like myself.
Yeah, you can totally take the greedy approach. And Zach talked about it in previous podcasts about loving to have greed as an element in player psychology in games that he designs. And this one has that there as well. Like there are cards that are amazing to have. And if you think you can swoop that card and then get something else because you're scared everyone off with such a high bid, that's great. You can also bluff with putting coins on top of your bid card, make it seem like you've done a massive bid and then you've only put one underneath it and you scare people away with that. But there's also passive play as well in this game. If you don't like being super confrontational, where you just get out of people's way, you can quite clearly assess the kinds of cards that players will be vying for, not only just by looking at what they've bid on, but looking in their tableau to see what has got more value for them. And you can bid on cards that you think no one else will win, and you often can get them cheaply, which means you haven't used many coins this round and you have more coins to be able to try and guarantee something in the next round. So often getting out of people's way and just kind of being a little bit passive and then just waiting for your time to strike can be viable too.
Yeah, I have talked about the greed factor in previous games, so people shouldn't be surprised to know that this is one of my absolute favorite games. I know we're generally not supposed to...
Wait, you've played this game?
Yeah,
what?
I have.
You know about it?
I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, since the reveal, right?
Yeah, since the reveal, that's right.
Just played it 40 times since then.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Just since the reveal. I know we're generally not supposed to like say about how our own games are our favorite games, but for me, I mainly play games that we're testing because I have a family. I don't have that much time outside of the office to play games. And so I spend a lot of time playing the games that we're currently working on. And so I've played this a lot of times and I absolutely fell in love with it. And as Shem said, it really does feel kind of like an area control game in many ways, in like a weird way. But as you said, Sam, there's like multiple ways to play it. You can be the aggressive player, and sometimes that bites you in the bum because you're going for all the best cards, and so another two people at the table, and you're basically guaranteed to not get one of those two cards. Whereas if you're that player who just passively goes for the cards that are the worst two options available, they just might be able to pick them up for super cheap, and they might end up winning the game in the end. Because the other thing about this game is that winning the auctions is one thing, but then actually translating that into points is like a whole nother skill set. And like translating those resources and your tableau into points isn't necessarily equivalent with just winning the best cards. And that's another thing I love about this game, is that you can have someone who dominates the auctions and then someone else who actually just got like great sets of cards for their tableau and actually manages to win out the game at the end. So I think that's a really cool element, that it's got multi-facets. It's not a one-dimensional game for any sense. It's not just about the auction, and I appreciate that.
Just stepping back a little bit before we dive too much into the mechanisms of the game, the auctioning and the engine building, the tableau building, I'm curious, Sam, where the actual theme for the game came from, because this is one of the few games that you named and the name stuck. It's like usually I end up changing names and things, but Secret Societies was the name you started with, I think. Well, let us know, what was the story? How did it begin?
Yeah, so the original working title was Geography Game or Countries Game. That was the original working title. So it actually started as a symmetrical game. So it didn't start as an asymmetrical game. Now, I will often do whatever I can in games where I think it will work to put asymmetry in. But that didn't actually come to me straight away with this. I started with that kind of nostalgic note, like I was talking about before, where I really wanted a game about geography, about collecting these countries with the stats of the countries on the cards and things like that. But then I had to ask myself the question, okay, but why are we bidding for these countries? Who are we? What's the story? And the first idea for the game was that we were all aliens, because that made sense, like aliens that have kind of taken over the Earth so to speak. And they've got their own different factions and things like that. And they are buying these countries to kind of have their own ownership and stuff like that. I quickly discarded that idea because I didn't want the game to just be another sci-fi game, so to speak. I really wanted the real world, the real geography of the game to shine rather than just to kind of be lost in, hey, there's this sci-fi game, we're all playing as aliens and things like that. So I wanted it to not kind of detract from the main theme that I was pushing for, which is the countries and our world itself to shine. So then I was thinking, well, who else could we be? Who else could be auctioning off these countries? And this idea of these secret societies all around this table, these nefarious dark societies that, you know, conceivably some of them exist today. I don't know. Disclaimer, none of us are members of secret societies, nor do we endorse being members of these secret societies. But this idea kind of made sense that these different societies were auctioning off these countries from kind of the shadows, so to speak. And this led to the game being mechanically asymmetrical. So what normally I would start with, hey, how do I mechanically make an asymmetrical game? Actually, this came from a thematic standpoint first. What's the theme? Who are we? And then the secret societies just lends itself to becoming kind of a mechanical idea of playing as different asymmetries.
So I guess a lot of those factions, the societies that you chose, you know, you've probably got a list of ones that were like the obvious picks. Got the Illuminati and stuff, the vampires and so on. Did they then influence mechanically what those factions would be and how they would feel to play, I guess?
Yeah, totally. I think some of them definitely more than others, right? Some of them just made a lot of sense. Like we have the influencers who have to cancel a country. They cancel a country and they endorse a country. So that made sense. And that thematic idea kind of led to the mechanical idea. Others, maybe it's a little bit more of a stretch for like how they work, integrating the mechanic and the theme. But there is a faction called the Aliens. So there is one sci-fi faction, which I don't think makes the whole game feel sci-fi, but it just makes it kind of just fits in with potential secret societies that some people believe in, you know, UFOs and things like that. And they auction off planets for people to buy. So they also feel very thematic.
Yeah, and like the reptilians is a conspiracy that people believe that some famous people and whatnot are actually reptilians pretending to be humans. And so the reptilian faction can use other people's bid cards and put their own little reptilian face on it. So like that feels very thematic to the kind of whole myth or conspiracy around these reptilians.
Yeah, totally. They're like the skin changes, right? And so my approach with these secret societies, these different player powers to play as, was that they're not only going to change how you play the game. You know, some games will take this approach with player powers. You know, some games like Pandemic and Merchant's Cove and stuff. Not that that's a bad approach at all, but the approach I wanted to have was that the secret societies will also change how your opponents play the game as well. And so you notice their presence and you notice their absence. So one of the things that came about in trying to create 8 unique player powers that changed how others play the game was that when you're revealing these country cards that you're betting on each round, I decided that there would be a face down card that the Stonesmiths, their power is pretty much just that they know what the face down card is. So it could be China, it could be amazing, or it could be, I don't know, I don't want to throw shade on any country. Let's say it was Finland, a little bit smaller, not as many people as China, you know. And the idea for this faction is simply that knowledge is power. And they need to leverage their knowledge of this unknown for all other factions and make themselves rich off it. And eventually they can start like stacking the deck a little bit and choosing the card that goes there that no one else knows about. But the really interesting thing about making this a mechanic is not just when Stonesmith's in the game, but it's when they're not in the game as well. Because the rules don't change. There is still this face down card here, which I normally wouldn't put in a game, this level of randomness. There's this face down card there that when Stonesmiths aren't in the game, no one knows what's behind it. And you end up having some rounds where there's bid wars for this face down card because no one likes the other stuff that's on offer. And that's just a really cool thing that came about from making these player powers. There's lots of other stories like that about how not only the inclusion of the faction would change the game, but also their exclusion as well. The other thing about asymmetry is that it actually provides a bit of direction in the game, where if players don't like auctions so much, I think they'll find that having a player power is going to teach them how to play the auction a little bit better. There are different player powers that kind of thrive in certain areas, like contesting auctions or not contesting auctions and things like that. And so I think actually this direction will be helpful for players that don't normally like auctions because they've got advantages in certain areas, or they might get bonuses for losing auctions and things like that, which should soften, I think, the feeling of the game being too kind of swingy or snowbally. I don't think it is because of these player powers giving that direction.
I think there'll be a bunch of people listening who are, game designers or dabbling with game design. They will probably want to know the answer, Sam. How do you balance, or how do you begin to balance a game with asymmetry to this extent? A game like Chaos Order or Secret Societies, where it's not just, like you're saying, it's not just a faction that has their player power, but their influence on the other characters is quite large as well. Like, where do you begin?
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm still learning. Like, I think in one sense, these styles of games are never fully perfectly balanced. But we get to the end of a play, we play it over and over and over again, and we ask ourselves these questions. We've talked about them on the podcast before. Do you think that you deserve to win? How did you feel that game? And then there are also things that you ask around like, well, what were the factors that made up your victory, right? And if it was always that the same faction was winning and it was always because of their player power, then that's clearly a problem. Or if it felt like in round one that certain factions just didn't have the tools to deal with other factions, then we would look at that. Because I think round one is the time when you can most address these player powers before all the other emergent factors come into it. And we found this actually with Chaos Order also, that our strictest balancing was done for the round one relic fight, because there is progression in the game, because there are ways to level up and there are ways to snowball, not out of control. And I think we'll talk about rubber banding in a bit, but that is where you have the most control, because the only thing that's different amongst the players at the start of the game is their player power. Whereas as it gets later into the game, all the previous decisions that the player has made up until that point, how they've chose to build their engine, the cards they've chosen to draft or auction for, they've provided all of this emergent asymmetry that I can't reproduce every game, right? And so there's all these other factors that would kind of add an asterisk to the result. But in round one, it's when we can kind of apply the most care and attention to detail and balance. And if someone felt like they didn't have a chance in round one, then we'd have to look at, well, is this intended for this faction? Are they supposed to have a really steep arc where they actually are supposed to lose early and level up? If that's the case, then it's fine. But otherwise, we'd have to do something about it. But that's only just starting to talk about balance. There's a lot of intuition. There's a lot of playtesting. And at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to say, yep, I think this is good enough. I'm really happy with the level of balance that we got to, because I think that it's never just the asymmetry in this game that leads to wins. There's so much room for skill expression, but also like some good breaks as well, based on what other players do. That's definitely a factor that, yeah, is really hard to isolate down to just one variable.
This is an auction game, although we've talked about it also feeling like an area control game, but it is very much an auction game. You're placing bids, you're trying to buy these countries. Was this a particular mechanic that you wanted to design with? I know people have mixed feelings about this as a mechanic in games, but was this something that you were particularly interested in as a designer to experiment with?
Yeah, so as I was sort of hinting at before, being able to have imbalanced cards, like what the countries really are, lends itself towards auction. So players kind of decide the value for each thing that they want to get, plus also the excitement and the interaction and the tension that provides, I think. And when I did my first playtest of this game, when it was literally just a concept, how can I figure out how to draft these countries, I came up with this auction system, which is still in the game today. And I don't know if I've seen it in other games. It maybe is in other games, this whole idea of having bid cards, and you can do one face down and one face up, and you can also stack coins on the cards to increase the value, but the stacked coins are always lost, and so they add this level of risk to your bid, but it is your way to augment your bid. Whereas if you lose your bid normally without having stacked coins, you don't have to pay the value. I came up with that in the very first playtest, and that just seemed to work. So it kind of became this thing that, yep, okay, I've got a way to have countries in a game, and I've got a way to draft these countries that is working, that's unique, that's fun, that leads to cool, tense moments. So at that point, I didn't want to fix it because it was something that I thought was quite compelling about the game. But to say a little bit more on auctions that I didn't say earlier, I also wanted to add to this auction this idea of like emergent value. So every card has land and it has population and it has industry based on the card's real stats. And if that was all that the cards had, then it would be kind of this card is better, then this card is better, and then so on and so forth. And it would be kind of like linear. But what I wanted was also for each card to have a different amount of additional value based on the context of the game, based on the player's previous decisions. And this is done in lots of different ways with the ways that you score points and build out your tableau. But the main way that I want to highlight is this idea of neighboring countries. So on the cards, they have on them all of the neighboring countries that are included in the game. So not all the neighboring countries, but all of the ones that are included in the game. And when you gain a country that you've already got a neighbor for that share a land border, you get this really, really nice Brucey bonus. It's really strong. And what happens there? So let's give an example. Say I've got Brazil and Argentina shows up. Now, Argentina is more valuable to me than purely just the stats that it gives. So in a sense, it's more valuable to me than it is to you. So there's this kind of like emergent value in the game, and that's giving me direction, right? But say that there's a player who has Chile, which also shares a border with Argentina. Now that player over there is more likely to contest me for Argentina, and the other players are probably going to get out of the way. Although, if they want to, they could be annoying and try to deny us that link. So I think it provides direction. I think this emergent value idea adds kind of like tension and excitement. And it also is adding this variability to the game that wouldn't be there otherwise. If the cards were just their pure stats and nothing else, and there was no way that their value would change for players, then the order of the cards coming out and what other players have already done up until that point would not change the feeling of the game at all. But as it is, this order actually really matters and is going to lead to all these varied game states.
And having those like different layers to these cards really does kind of give more character to those cards too. Like, you know, when the USA card comes out, like, the USA card, and for different reasons, I've got Mexico or I've got Canada or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
The other part I like that you haven't mentioned yet is how the deeds, the countries, are divided into 5 regions, roughly by continent. And that's the other motivation, right? For 2 reasons. One is that when you get like 4 different in a row or above or below your playboard, you kind of get the 5th card for free, like the 5th region for free, which is like the kind of filling out the wide element of your card tableau. And then there's the other motivation to go quite tall on the same region. So getting 3 or 4 of the same region gets you a monument. So there's like lots of layers and lots of reasons to go for one card over another. Like you said, you guys might want Argentina, not because it's black card, because it's got the connection, but I might want it because if I get their black card, I get their blue card for free, or it might be the monument I want for black, or whatever it might be. So
there's another layer as well if you've unlocked your scoring for certain regions, because you can also during the game unlock scoring where you get 2 points per card in a certain region. And so towards the end of the game, especially when people start unlocking these, you look around the table and see what people have unlocked, and it gives you a better idea of what they're likely to bid on to get extra points.
Yeah. So I just want these moments where like people really care about this card that's come up in the auction they really want to get. And if they can't get it, then they make other plans. I think the game does a good job of actually giving players direction. Even though there's like so many countries that you could bid on, you start the game with one little country, your little state. You've got like Lesotho or Qatar or something like that. But already, because I'm the only one, say I've got Lesotho, I'm the only one with an African card, then if another African card shows up, I can win the race to that monument, and I can make it harder for the other players to get the monument because the number of African deeds required to get the next monument is higher. So players already start the game with a little bit of kind of skin in the game and a little bit of direction. But if none of those African cards show up, or no cards that neighbor your starting country show up, then players still can just say, right, I just want to start the game going for the stuff that's going to give me the most resources now, and that's enough direction for them. And then later on in the game, they're going to have more and more direction as these cards with emergent value come out. Oh, I've already got Brazil, now Argentina showed up, happy days, I'm going to go for that. And the level of AP it's less about what do I want, and it's more about how do I guarantee I get the thing I want, or how do I get out of the way of my opponents, or maybe get in the way of them. So I think the AP is really in the right places rather than in the wrong places for the game. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, and all of that also doesn't even take into account the asymmetry, right? Like the robots might be invested because they're drones on it, or the tech bros might bid on your one because they want to keep another one open, or there's like
Right.
the alien planet might be on that first deed card, so there's more motivation for that card. There's just so many layers, which makes the auction very deep, very rich, and yeah, very engrossing, I'd say. Like as a player, you're so invested in it. Like you talk about AP, but really it's like it's investment more than anything. I don't think there's that like analysis paralysis where you just don't know what to do. It's just like, this is so important. I must make the right decision. And everyone's feeling it, right? Like it's not just about your turn. Maybe Sam has done all his bids and it's me like agonizing for my last bid. He's still invested because what I do
That's right.
matters. Like he has no control over what I do, but like where I go, he's staring at the table hoping I don't go where I want to go. Doesn't want me to go, whatever it is. So yeah, it's like, it's not downtime. We talked about this on the last episode. I think it's not downtime in that sense. It's just like very intense engagement from all players, which is great. So good. Because the other part of the game, which we'll probably talk about now, I guess, we've got this big, deep auction, lots of investment, lots of everyone focusing, really trying to make the optimal moves they can to get the deeds they want. The other side of the game, which is more the Euro side, I guess, the more the engine building, the tableau building, that side of it is mostly simultaneous, right? So maybe we should talk about that some more and dive into that bit.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask a question to you about that side of the game, Sam. And it's a part I really love about the game, how there's this balance between using the resources that you gain from the cards, right? So you either choose to tuck a card above to gain the industry or the GDP of the country, or you tuck it below to gain the population of the country, and you're always going to gain the land. And there's this real balance between the top giving you income. So either one is going to give you points for the end game, but the top is going to increase your income of coins. So you're going to have more coins to buy cards. And the bottom is going to give you some kind of sneaky powers to try and get cards for cheaper. And I love this tension and this balance about which direction am I going to go? Am I going to try and do both? So when in the design process did you figure this out about creating this tension between these two, I guess, directions that you can take your game?
Yeah, I think this was also in the initial prototype. I really like multi-use cards. So we've done this before in other games like, Architects with the tools and the adornments and things like that, and blanking. Paladins. Paladins is the great example. Paladins where you've got the outsiders that you can attack or convert. And one of the things I like is that if you can see something out there for a player that they really, really want. So say in Paladins, they've got a lot of flip debts and there's the outsider that comes that scores flip debts, then you want to make sure that player can't get them. If you're playing interactively, you want to make sure that they don't get them. But you might not want to convert them because you haven't flipped many debts and that's not worth anything for you. But what you can do in Paladins is you can say, I'm going to go and attack them and deal with them and I'm going to get a bonus that I want. And it's kind of like allowing this like hate draft, I guess, to the game, so to speak. But it's all within the fun and the interaction of the game in a way that rewards you for paying attention to what other players are doing. And so I like doing this in games where cards have two uses because it means you can draft away something that could be used in a different way for another player. Now, in this game, it's not so much on that, but that's kind of where I started with, knowing that I liked cards having two uses for that. And it really ended up staying in there because it worked and it made a lot of sense thematically. So thematically, if you take control of this country, you're either going to take control of all the people and get them to form your own projects and do your own bidding, right? And in that sense, you gain the population. Or you're going to just keep them doing what they're doing. And perhaps if you're an evil overlord, you're just going to tax them. Just increase the taxes and gain money and benefit from what the country is already doing and kind of be a little bit more non-interventionist style of ruler, right? This is delving into the weeds. The game doesn't feel quite that thematic, but that's kind of the original idea for it. And it just kind of works because what is great in games with engine building is not just having one way to build your engine, but having two or having three. We talked about this when we talked about Scythe and how we ended up all really loving the fact that there were about 4 ways. Like pretty much every action you could do in Scythe was building your engine in one way or another. And it allows players to experiment with different play styles. It allows players to have different paths to victory and to either lean into or not their player power. So with these cards, you can tuck the cards above. Finally coming around to Shem's question, when you tuck the cards above, you get the industry. And if you tuck the cards below, you get the population, but you always get the land. And when we go to the growth phase, all players simultaneously, they get to spend their resources. And it's fun. You're kind of looking through all the different powers that you could have. The industry is quite simple in that you spend a varied amount of industry and a varied amount of land to boost your income. And that's the number of coins you get each round. A very simple way of engine building, but it's a compelling way. People like to have more money. It means that they can spend more to get the countries they want on the future rounds. And we see that this works in a game like Brass, where pretty much everything you're doing early game to increase your income more and more and more, so that late game you can use that income to guarantee points. And so that was a system that really just works. And that's something that players can go after if they want. They can go after having more money. But if players decide to tuck cards below, get the population, instead they can opt into this kind of tech tree, which is another thing that I like in games, is having tech tree, having different powers to unlock. So players could go for income, they could go for these powers, and with the powers, they provide even more variability because you could go for different ones each game. And there are some that might be synergistic with your player power, or there are some that might help you to deal with other people's player powers better. So you're not going to always go for the same every game. And that creates quite a cool amount of variability and room for exploration in the game. What is the feeling that you have in the growth phase? Like, it's not really a common trope to have this simultaneous spending phase in an auction style game. What were your guys' thoughts about this?
Well, I think apart from the obvious people that will get saying, but your friends could cheat in this phase, which they very well could do, but generally the same answer is don't play with friends that cheat. But I think it's really good because you have this other phase where it's like so tense and you're waiting for your turn to bid, and then you finally get to the point where it's like, okay, how am I going to build my engine? And you can just do that. Like everyone can do that at the same time. You're umming and ahhing over the most efficient way to spend your resources. Sometimes if you want to unlock some really cool powers, you're like, maybe I shouldn't spend all my resources, because you're not obligated to. You can just hold on to them and spend them the next turn. Sometimes you've had a round where you spent a whole bunch of money and you're like, oh man, I have to upgrade my income. Otherwise I'm going to have like zero money the next turn and I'm going to be in trouble. So sometimes you're doing it out of necessity. Sometimes you're strategizing and building up your engine. And then there's also a certain point we didn't mention, apart from before, I think I mentioned it briefly, but you can also spend these resources to lock in scoring for each of the regions, for every card that you have in those regions. And that's not going to build your economy engine in any way. It's not going to help you win more cards. But the thing is with these region investments is the more cards you have in that region, the more they cost you to lock in. So it can actually be really efficient locking them in really early game so that you don't have to pay all those extra resources to lock them in late game. So there's also that consideration. Like, do I lock in a region early? Like, do I think I'm going to be getting a bunch of cards in that region? But then if you lock in a region early and then you just don't end up getting those cards because of how the auction falls, then it could have been a waste of resources. So there's a whole bunch of considerations. There's so many ways that you could play your growth phase. And I think that's one of the reasons I really love this game. One of the reasons I want to keep coming back to this game is because there are so many ways you could play your growth phase. There are so many strategies to pursue because it's not just about do I go projects or industry, but what combination of projects and income do I do? And then even in saying that, countries are asymmetric, right? So you can have Italy, which has like 1 land and 5 industry. And it's like, if I win Italy, I think it's 1 and 5 or 1 and 4.
1 and 4, yeah.
1 and 4, okay. If I win Italy, I've only got 1 land. So that means I can only actually upgrade my income once. If I had another land from somewhere else, I could spend those for industry across multiple upgrades and upgrade my income twice. But because I've only got 1 land, I'm actually limited in my decision space. And so the combination of these resources, the land with the industry and the land with the population, also makes the decisions really interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's just so much for players to explore in the growth phase.
often like by round 2 or 3, you kind of know what you want to be achieving in your next growth phase. So like you're saying, you go into the next auction, like, oh, I need 3 land. Like that's my objective, is to get 3 land so that I can do this thing because I've got all the industry lined up, whatever it might be. So that gives you some other extra direction in that
Yeah.
auction. I really like how the 2 phases are very different. So the game I keep thinking about is a very different game, but Project Elite, where you have this intense simultaneous phase in that game where you're just chucking dice and trying to fight back these aliens. And then you have this moment of peace where you basically like resolve things, do some cleanup, you have a talk, you debrief and figure out what the next round's gonna be like. And it's like, oh, we can like relax for a bit and rest. And it's very different from Secret Societies, but that whole complete opposite feeling of the 2 phases is what makes me think of it, where you've got absolute massive tense interaction followed by this peaceful engine building moment of like spending resources and doing things that Eurogamers love doing, and then you're back into it. And so I like how that kind of switches. Like often in a game that has phases, this game has phases, but often those games feel very mechanical, where you're like, all right, phase 1, all right, that now phase 2, all right, now phase 3. They all feel kind of samey. And I can't think of the game, but I played one game that was like 8 to 10 phases per round, and all those phases felt so boring. Like just like, all right, do this procedure, all right, do this procedure, and now I'm back to the start again. Whereas in Secret Societies, it's like a little bit of income, and then we're straight into bidding, very tense, and then you get this nice, do some things, all right, back in, and every phase feels important. It feels like it has its own character and flavor, and how you're thinking, how you're planning. It's not just the same the entire round, which I really, really like.
Yeah, so you get through the auction phase so that then you can have your own little mini game of Hadrian's Wall in between.
I mean, even that, like how there's all the interaction, how it's completely opposite. There's no interaction, essentially. There's like maybe 1% interaction if it matters, but generally there's no interaction in that second half. That's also really nice because it's so intense. And then you have the complete opposite. Like it's like a nice, relaxing thing of like, I don't have to worry about what you're doing. I want to keep an eye on what you're doing in that phase, because if you're going for something like the conferences, for example, these kind of majority checks at 2 phases in the whole game where, it's like about getting projects of 2 land size. Well, I want to see what you guys are doing because that's important.
Right.
But really, I'm thinking about how can I get the edge for the next auction? Do I get more money? Do I get that cool card that lets me be more of a bully in the next one? Do I get my character has a special ability? Do I want that unlocked? There's like a lot of things to consider, but it's always coming back to the auction, which is really cool, where it's like it's about prepping for the next moment of intensity in the game.
And like there are a few things when I think when you unlock them, you should tell the table that you unlocked it. Like agents, for example. You can unlock these agents, which are basically on your first bid, you get to place a token on 2 other deed cards. And at the end of all the bidding phase, in turn order, everyone with agents gets to move one of their 2 or more bids to one of these agents. So that's quite a game-changing ability. And so whenever I unlock it, I just tell the table, I'm like, I just unlocked agents. Like everyone should be aware of that now, because otherwise it can kind of like catch people by surprise.
Yeah, but there are even these little like combo type things you can do in the growth phase. There's a few little bonuses on each player's player board where you'll get discounts if you've already done certain things, or you'll get bonuses for connecting links, or you can unlock a power that lets you do trades in the growth phase. And so there are these small moments each game which make you feel smart with your sequencing of resources and getting combos and bonuses back from your player board from playing the growth phase well. And that can be quite fun for the people that like games like Hadrian's Wall. You know, you do get those little heads down combo-rific moments in this game.
So you hinted at something earlier, Sam, so I think I know what the answer will be. But what was, for you, the most challenging part of development for this game?
Yeah, so you asked a question earlier about how did I get the balance right for the asymmetry? And that was far, far easier than getting the balance right for the player that's winning. So the key factor really in this game wasn't this faction keeps winning, but it's like once this person gets ahead, it's really hard to catch up. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about rubber banding, because that was one of the things that I struggled with the most in this game. So rubber banding is kind of a necessity in some games. It's kind of like the other side that's necessary when you have a game that's got a lot of progression. Progression is good because players like to power up. They like to become stronger in games. It's a great feeling. It provides an arc to the game, and we often call this engine building, but it can take other forms too. It also allows for skill expression and excitement and things like that, so that round 1 feels very different from round 7 because I've leveled up. You know, this is just a trope in video games. It's a trope in a whole lot of different things. Progression is great. But a downside to progression, especially if it's a competitive game, is that if a player does well and they sequence things really well, they can get ahead. They can snowball, and this progression can be really hard to catch up to for other players. Imagine football, where every time you score a goal, you gain an extra member onto your team. That would cease to be a fun sport to watch or to play. You know, like they're just going to keep getting further and further ahead. And so the negative to progression and why rubber banding is necessary is that if players don't feel like they can win, for a lot of players, not every player, but a lot of players, they disengage and the game ceases to be fun for them. And if someone disengages, the whole table can tell. It kind of is a bit down buzz, right? And so even for the winner, the person that's leading, it can become unfun and anticlimactic if people are disengaged. And they kind of robbed of having this exciting moment when they win the game because others are like, yeah, you won 3 turns ago. Like, we don't care, bro. Like, and that's not fun for the winner. It's not fun for the people playing. So we put rubber banding in games as kind of like a counterbalance to progression. But we don't want the rubber banding to be so impactful that it kind of makes all of your progression obsolete, right? And so I like to talk about rubber banding in 2 ways. There's kind of like organic rubber banding and there's artificial rubber banding. Organic rubber banding is the rubber banding that I really like, if possible to put it in there, because it's the rubber banding that you don't notice very much. It's not that obvious, right? So in real world terms, it's like the person that's leading in the cycling peloton, there's some rubber banding going on there because they're taking the headwind and they've got all the resistance of the wind and all of that, and people can get in their slipstream and they are conserving a lot of energy. They don't have to bike as hard because they're behind. That's an organic rubber banding, right? We can put this in some board games as well. This idea of rubber banding that slows the leader down, but people don't really notice it. It kind of just feels like part of the game. So in one of the games I designed, Circadian's First Light, all of your major point scoring actions, and actually Architects is the same when you build buildings, you spend a worker, you spend a die, permanently it's locked up and out of the game. And it's really noticeable in First Light that when you spend a worker, you've got one less worker. And now you need to take an action to gain another worker if you want to be at your max workforce. And this is just a really nice organic way of slowing down the person that's winning. If they're scoring lots of points, they're spending all these dice, but now they've got fewer dice to take actions. So that's an organic way of doing rubber banding. There are lots of other examples of artificial rubber banding. The most famous one, I'll say, and this one is actually often lauded, but like, I don't know, I don't love it so much. It works, but it's, again, I prefer have organic rubber banding, is Quacks of Quedlinburg with the rat's tails. They've put these little rat's tails on the scoring track, and based on how many of these you're behind the person that's in the lead, you get a bonus of that many going into the next round. Now, this works super well. This is great, but people can also game it as well. I think the reason why I don't love this kind of artificial rubber banding is that it seems very interventionist. It seems like you can see behind the curtain. It seems like you can see the designer's hand, like the designer's giving you a bit of a push, trying to help you out, you know? And I like those things to be things that you don't even notice, that feel a lot more subtle, the rubber banding. But sometimes you need to have this artificial rubber banding. And so in starting off designing Secret Societies, I wanted there to be progression. I wanted it to matter that you could win countries and then you could spend those resources and get ahead. And so I started by just leaning on some of these organic ways of rubber banding. So, for example, if you win a bid, you're going to spend that money. And that money you're not going to have next round. If you lose a bid, you haven't spent money. And so you're going to have more money next round because you haven't spent it. So that's one kind of organic thing. It's like, great, if I don't pay money, then I'm going to have more next round. And that kind of works a bit. And then there's also this idea that if you win a bid, that card is now gone and you have to wait another round to get it. So if I'm bullying with my 5 card and I win an auction with it, well, I'm not going to have it next round unless I pay more money to get it. And I think that is also a way that is kind of very organic to provide rubber banding. But it turned out that these things that are rubber banding in the game were not enough. And that was kind of the challenge that I was coming across, that I had to actually put my fingerprint in the game a little bit more. I had to intervene a little bit more to give people a little bit more help, more than just these kind of organic ways. So I had to add in artificial rubber banding as well. The first way that works quite well is that your bid cards, they will also have this little consolation bonus that if you use a bid card and you lose, then you gain a little bonus from that. And you get to pick that card back up into hand, so you'll use it next round. You haven't spent your money and you get a bonus. And that works really well. And that provided an opportunity for me to use those bid cards and the compensation or the consolation bonuses on them to leverage those in some of my balancing of factions and faction powers and stuff. So that was a really cool opportunity in adding those to the game. But it turns out that even that wasn't quite enough. It wasn't quite enough to my level of satisfaction where I wanted more rubber banding. Now, I could have sat with just that and it would have been fine. But we would have seen that players that got ahead early would win about 65% of the time. So a significant amount, but not insane. And I could have stuck with that. But I also decided that I wanted to add a few more events and other things that would help out players that were really behind. It was at the point where someone getting ahead wasn't going to win, but someone getting behind probably would lose, if that makes sense. So it wasn't determining the ultimate victor, but it was hard for someone to catch up, even with all of those different measures thrown in. And so I added in some events, basically, some more artificial rubber banding to keep people in the game. So like, if you don't win the conference, you get a little consolation. Now, it's not as significant as winning the conference because you want to win the conference, but basically it should help you to try to catch up. I think it's in a point where I'm happy that the progression is significant. It is meaningful. It is worthwhile trying to get your engine up and running. But if you lose a few auctions in a row, you're not going to be down and out of the game. There are going to be things that are going to help you to catch up. And also those organic ways as well means that you still are in with a chance to keep fighting in the game. But that was definitely something that was a massive challenge. I don't know what you guys think about the rubber banding. I've been talking for a long time.
Well, I think one of the rubber bandings that you didn't actually mention, I think that was added in more for players' feelings as well. So one thing is if you don't win any bids,
True.
if you don't win any countries, you gain a number of resources, and it starts off as like 2 of any resource between land, population, and industry, and later on in the game that becomes 3. And I think that was about players actually being able to do something in the growth phase, right? Because not only did you lose and you didn't gain any cards, but then you do the whole growth phase and you suddenly like can't
you don't get to play the game.
You can't
do
exactly. Anything, you don't get to play the game.
Yeah, that's more of a fail-safe mechanism, right? Like where it's a player who gets nothing in round 1, they're out of the game, really. Like we've seen comebacks, like we have, but if you hit 2 rounds in a row of getting nothing, then you're out. Like you've got no engine building, you haven't increased your income, you've got no new powers. You're out of the game. So those little resources can really help keep a player in the game, which is good.
And then I also remember the very last rubber banding that was added was a final event, and that was quite late in the piece, wasn't it?
Yeah. Basically, I just want people to keep having hope that it's worth fighting to try and win, because I think the scores can be surprising in the game. I've had players that felt like they didn't do that well, that managed to score well, and the opposite also. And so what I'm really trying to combat is just the mentality, like stick in it, you're not doing so bad, and there's still an avenue where you could clutch this out and you could win. Because you can have games where you have a really lean play style. I think Shem played a game recently where he had 1 income for the whole game. He got 1 coin per round. You can get this thing up to 12 coins per round or something like that. And normally you're in the 6 or 7 range, right? Like you want to have a good amount of income. But Shem managed to make a lean gameplay work. And so, yeah, all of this is just basically, at the end of the day, to keep people engaged throughout the whole game and to facilitate different play styles and avenues to victory.
I am a sneaky player, though. That's
yes.
Too fair. Anytime that a big country comes out, these guys will jump on it, like bidding 6 to 8 coins. And I'm like, cool, I'll get these 2 little countries that no one cares about and just try and benefit from them in where I can. But
for like $2, yeah. Go to the thrift store.
It's like my natural play style. So I think you could easily outplay it, knowing they would do that. But yeah, it's fun, real fun.
So this Kickstarter, as people will have noticed, also has an expansion included. And I don't know if we've ever done that before. It's not a common thing for Garphill to release an expansion together with the base game. So how did that come about? And I'm asking you as well, Shem, like, why do we have an expansion together with the base game?
I think the game was mostly done maybe back in March, maybe earlier. I say done as in like the gameplay was there. There was still balancing things going on and still some development, but the game was pretty much done. We had the artists lined up. We knew what the game was going to be component wise, but we knew we weren't going to go to Kickstarter till like September, October this year. So there's months ahead of us. And I think we just got to thinking like, well, like maybe imagine if you took out all the countries and did states instead, like US states. Like what would that look like for the game? And as soon as anything like that enters Sam's brain, he cannot stop thinking about it. So I think at that point, I'd already done all of the background illustrations, the silhouettes for the countries. It took me like 3 weeks or something to like do all these little things. And of course, my thought's like, well, if we do this, I've got to do like 60 more of these things, little skylines. So there's a bunch of work there, but hey, like we could do it. And then I think over the weekend, Sam had pretty much figured out how an expansion could look. He'd already probably figured out two, or at least early new factions that could be added. And it was more about figuring out like, how would this change the gameplay? Like we tried it, I think, Sam, with the whole neighboring border system where just like the base game where the countries would benefit from being next to each other. But the states, there were way more connection points, right?
Yeah, too many. It was very obvious that that was going to be unfeasible, that we couldn't have all of these different neighboring states. We'd have to have another way for players to move their satellite along. So that was a design challenge for sure. And I wanted it to still have a slight kind of learning value. Like the bordering nations, I don't know if people care for it. There's a slight kind of learning value where, oh, I never knew that, for example, Afghanistan and China share a border that is very, very small. It's tiny, but they do share a land border. And so I like those moments. If people care for it, it's the game will offer it, but you don't have to interact with it on that level. And so we wanted to do this with the states, but it just was very unfeasible to use the borders. These cards would have like 8 different icons on them to show all of their linked states. So no, that wasn't going to work. And what we ended up deciding on was we needed to get a good number of them as well, the states having them. But we ended up with these 5 categories that about 8 to 12 states would fall under. And whenever you collect a card that was part of this category, then you would get to bump up a track, and eventually bumping up the tracks would give you satellites and stuff like that. But so for these to have learning value, what we decided to do was they were states or territories that were bordering the Pacific Ocean, states that the Mississippi River ran through, states that Route 66 runs through, states that border Canada, and then the last ones are like the founding states, the original however many states there were.
It was like the original British
colonies. Yeah. So there's some learning value there. It's like, oh, I never knew that Route 66 ran through so-and-so state, and it's there. And we could have chosen other categories, but these were the ones that gave a good spread throughout the American map. And yeah, that seemed to work really well mechanically. But the real thing that made me excited about doing this expansion, as cool as it is to have the states, and it is really cool, and I think for some people that will be exciting for them to be able to auction off states, especially for the Americans, but it was the opportunity to come up with 2 more player powers. And I had already had this idea for a faction that I really wanted to include into the game, which were the bankers. And my idea for them was that players, if they didn't have enough money, they could just ask the bankers for a loan, and the bankers would give them money. But then at the start of each round, that player would have to pay the bankers interest on their loan. And I just thought that that was so cool mechanically, but also thematically. And it really leaned into that same idea that I had when talking about asymmetry of each faction's inclusion would change the game for all players. And so I probably designed my favorite faction, not favorite faction to play, but like favorite faction in terms of the design and the bankers with this expansion. So that was, the thing that kind of locked me in and made me really excited about doing this was just being able to provide these extra societies that you can play with the base game as well.
And then, of course, we got to thinking about giving away something for free with the Kickstarter, because we usually give away a promo or something. And, of course, they got put out there as, hey, should we give away an entire faction? Could Sam design another faction in a few months and test it and make sure it's good. And of course he did. So we're adding the Lycans as well, which is a lot of fun because they're kind of like, they're a faction that has two faces, two sides. There's two characters essentially. So Julie, our artist, was very happy to quickly get these drawn up before she went on to maternity leave, just in time. But yeah, what are the Lycans add, Sam, to the game?
Yeah, so this is where I actually learned what a lichen was, because I originally named them the werewolves, because we've got vampires in the game, so the werewolves, but the lichens. So when it's a full moon, they cannot disguise themselves. They are werewolves, and they basically have different powers based on that, and other players will have to pay money to interact with them and things like that because they're scared. But when it's not the full moon, which is every alternate round, they play a little bit more sneaky and from the shadows, and one of their bids might be a lichen or a werewolf, and one of them isn't, and that will change the value of their bids, which is a lot of fun for the player who likes to bluff, but also stressful, but a lot of fun for the player who likes to bluff. And they're also a faction that I'm really pleased with how they turned out. Just this little extra thing that we threw in, but they are quite an interesting faction, I'll say.
So obviously we have to wait to see how well the game is received. We never know going into this. We always just do our best work and hopefully everyone likes it and it's well received. But if it is well received and there is demand for more factions, more expansions, where would your brain go to next, Sam?
This is a tough one. I've already started thinking about it, but I definitely haven't landed the plane. I think that the UK would be really, really cool. Like England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, all of that sort of thing, counties and things like that. But the names of them are not as immediately well recognized to me as like the States of America. You know, they're just so much part of our culture here in New Zealand. We just know the names of the states and things like that. But then there's all sorts of other places around the world that would be cool to highlight. Maybe the whole of Europe, maybe there's a game there, or, you know, this system could be done also in a non-geography setting as well. I'm sure you could still use these secret societies to be auctioning off other stuff like companies and all sorts of things. So I don't know, there's lots of different ideas there. There's lots of potential avenues, and I would be listening really closely to what people would want to see as well. This podcast has gone on long, but I've actually got a question for both of you guys. Different question for both of you. My question for Shem is, this game is really different from a Garphill game, not only in terms of play, like there are some similarities with the growth phase with some other games we've done and stuff like that, but it is definitely very different mechanically, but also thematically. Like, it's not ancient, it's not historic, it's not medieval. Like, why this game and why now, I guess? Why Garphill for this game?
So when we first played it, I think we were at a retreat. I remember some of the badges from ours guys played it too. It was a very rough version of the game with poker chips and stuff. And I immediately thought, because it's based on modern real world like statistics, it's very not Garphill. Like, we don't do modern day stuff. We'd like to look to ancient stuff or fantasy, sci-fi, you know, made up worlds, or thinking back to older worlds of, you know, different times, and that kind of the fantasy kind of feel, at least, to history. So I thought straight away, like, it's not a game that we would probably do because it doesn't fit into our style, despite enjoying the game and liking the mechanisms and things. But you know, I was like, keep to working on it. It's fun. It's very interesting and stuff. So you keep working on it. I jumped in on a few play tests, helped you rethink the UI of the game a bit and just how it could function. And it got to the point where we were playing it a fair bit. And all honesty, it's like, well, I'm really enjoying playing this game. And I know that, Sam, you don't love pitching games. So it's like the idea of taking this to someone else is like, oh, I don't want to do that. And I just got to thinking, like, well, if we did do it, like if we did do the game, how would that look? How would we approach it graphically with art and all that kind of stuff? And then from that kind of thought process, I started thinking through. And once I had really given it a lot of thought and figured out how we would do it, if we were to do it, that's when I started thinking, well, actually, this could work quite well. Like, it's a chance to do something different, to take a risk, to show a different side of the company, a different artist, different graphic design kind of look. So yeah, it's fun to try different things. But for us as a company, it's more like we need to know when the time is to do that. Like, there's some times when it's best just to keep our heads down and do what we do and deliver the games that people expect from us. And other times it's good to actually try different things. And this felt like the right moment to try something different.
Well, I'm incredibly grateful. I really, really enjoyed working on this game with you. And I'm really pleased with the product you've managed to dream up. So yeah, thanks. And okay, I've got a question also for Zach, because you did all of this nonsense on social media about the secret project and all of that. Why? I guess I don't need to ask anything more. Why?
So there's a number of reasons. This is something completely new for Garphill, as Shem just said. And when Garphill's tried new stuff in the past, it hasn't always been as successful as other stuff on Kickstarter, right? So both the Cicadians Kickstarters or multiple Cicadians Kickstarters were nowhere near as successful as the trilogies or even the ancient anthology games. And so I was kind of thinking, like, how can we make this game stand out? Because the game it's an amazing game. It's a great game, but it doesn't look like any of our other games. It's not going to have that kind of brand recognition that our other games have. And I was very much inspired by Brandon Sanderson's Secret Novels Kickstarter, which was a hugely successful Kickstarter, but just this kind of fun thing where he had secretly written 4 novels and then kickstarted them. And I was like, well, no one knows about this game. No one's expecting this game. Like, this would be the perfect opportunity to have some fun like that, to have this secret project and get people curious. And that's what it's about. For me, was about creating curiosity. I wanted people to be interested in what this game was going to be. Because if we just launched it and said, announcing the Secret Society's game, people may have just passed over it and just been like, you know, not recognizing the art, not seeing that it's like another ancient game or the first East, right? Because everyone's waiting for the first East game as well. It could have just easily been people passing over it and being like, I don't recognize that art. I don't know who did it, you know, not even thinking, oh, that's a Garphill game, right? So hopefully, I mean, we're recording this podcast before the campaign has gone live. So it could be that all this effort I've put in doesn't actually have a huge effect on it. But I'm hoping that it has given enough people the curiosity to check out the campaign, to actually look into what the game's about, right? Because obviously no game is for everyone. The game won't be for everyone. But I would like people to take the time to look into the game, to see if it's something they'd be interested in. And I also absolutely love the theme. Like, I thought the theme is genius. And it works, right? Secret projects, secret societies, it's all hush-hush. So I thought it was also a good opportunity. So I thought, this is the perfect opportunity to do something like this. Probably won't ever do something like this again, or not in the same way. And I thought up the idea of me not knowing what the game is and you guys hiding from me. That was quite fun for me, at least. I hope people didn't get sick of me being a troll. And if you didn't notice, the very final video actually had the game over my right shoulder in the background. So that was a little spoiler. But hey, it was fun, and I hope people appreciated it.
It's great. And thank you for the work you did. My favorite moment of that campaign, of like the whole secret project thing, was that we were trying so hard to keep a game secret, and we managed to keep it secret, but that we leaked another game in the process. And the Great Sea just got leaked, like a picture of us with it in the background on Facebook. And we kind of had 2 choices at that point, right? Like, pretend nothing happened, just don't acknowledge it, and maybe a few people would share it and it would get leaked, or make lemonade. And we chose to make lemonade, but that was quite a funny moment in the whole secret process where, well, we just leaked the Great Sea. So that's coming to you also sometime in the future.
Yeah, and I think it was a good decision to announce it, because otherwise we would have had people thinking that was the secret project, which might have led to exactly. People hoping for that thing and then getting something else. And so we didn't want people to have like those sorts of expectations squashed. And at the same time, I heard the Dice Tower News covered it, and I think Z was like, that shouldn't be how you announce a game, but that game was on the top of the hotness for like 5 days, so maybe that is how you should announce a game. I don't know. Like, it's just, who knows?
It's weird. It's weird, yeah. Who knows? Yeah, totally. Well, now it's time for us to do our draft, where I'm going to crush you.
Lovely.
That's right. Yeah. And now for something completely different. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion about secret societies. At the time of this podcast's publication, Secret Societies is live on Kickstarter. You can find the link in the podcast description. If you have any questions about the game or the concepts discussed in this episode, join the Garphill Games Discord server and write to us in the podcast channel. Welcome back to our BGG Top 200 draft.
This podcast, we will be drafting games 51 to 60. So, as always, the pick order is changed from last time. So, this time, Sam is last pick. So, he gets to ban one game out of these 10. And then Shem will pick, then I'll pick, then Sam will pick. And we have screenshotted each group of 10 from when we first started the draft, just so that games don't swap around. And so I'm going to read out to you the 10 games in order for this draft. Pax Pamir 2nd Edition, Puerto Rico, Cthulhu Death May Die, Cascadia, Caverna The Cave Farmers, On Mars, Pandemic Legacy Season 0, Anachrony, Blood Rage, and Age of Innovation. So, take it away.
I kind of wish this week I've got 2 bans, actually, because we have another Pandemic game and we have another Terra Mystica game. And I think, am I right in saying that I've got Terra Mystica and someone else has a Pandemic game already drafted? Yeah, Shem's got a Pandemic game already drafted. Okay, so I am going to ban Age of Innovation. I'm going to ban the Terra Mystica game so that I'm the only one with the Terra Mystica game because Gaia Project was also banned. So Age of Innovation has been banned. Over to you, Shem.
Well, I didn't want it anyway, Samuel. This is a good 10 for me. I think I've got 8 out of 10 ratings, 2 7s and a 6, but only 1 9. Any guesses?
Yeah, my guess is, it's between 1 or 2. I'm going to say it's Anachrony.
Correct. So I have not played Anachrony a whole lot, maybe 4 or 5 times, and it's been a while since I've played. But I do remember really enjoying it. And there's so many clever little systems, especially with how the workers kind of get exhausted and refreshed, how you can use them in your exosuits for those main actions, but also keep them at home for these little minor actions and stuff. There's just so much clever stuff in this game, especially for its age, like 8 years old. It still feels very modern in terms of game design.
Yeah.
I know this game got a lot of love from solo gamers, and I've not played it solo. So that's saying something. I think if I had played it solo, maybe it would be even higher for me. I'm not sure, but this is a great game. The production definitely helps. If you've got the big 3D mechs, the exosuits, like it looks amazing on the table as well. There are some like little iffy things, like some of the phasey nature of the game. We talked about it a bit with Secret Societies, where other games that have phases can feel a bit like going through the motions. And this game does have that a little bit. I think there's like 6 phases, and there's the whole thing of like kind of putting out future investments in time and going back in time and that kind of thing. But it all feels thematic and it feels like it should be there for a reason. Some of those things are a little bit fiddly, but overall, really good game from David Tursky, and I think co-designed as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, I've forgotten the other designer.
Victor Peter and Richard Aman, I think.
Thank you, Sam.
I should actually check, but yeah.
Same group as Tricerion, which is another very interesting game as well. But yeah, Anachrony is my top pick of this bunch.
I really like Anachrony. And do you remember, we actually took inspiration from this one for Inventors, where in Inventors we wanted each of the colored dice to sort of have a special bonus in particular action. And Anachrony was the game that did this really, really well, where you're building up your crew of workers, but each of them can do the stuff that the others can do, mostly, but they also have their bonuses in particular areas. And I thought the way that they have this kind of symmetry and asymmetry amongst the workers was really cool.
Oh, well, I may very well have picked Age of Innovation, even though I've never played it, because Sam banned Gaia Project so that I couldn't have it. So that's a little bit upsetting. Sam is hogging all of those games. So I've only actually played 2 games out of this group of 10, Blood Rage and Caverna. I think I'm going to pick Caverna. Now, I did enjoy Blood Rage. I only played that once. Caverna I played at least twice. Played it at very high play counts as well, which maybe wasn't a good thing. But I really enjoyed Caverna. The second play, I had kind of completed everything by the end of the game, and I might put that down to like maybe we weren't playing the rules 100% right, or there might have been a rules issue. But generally, I had a good time playing it. I remember my wife really enjoyed playing it as well. And I've never played Agricola, so I know that it's kind of like similar to that. So yeah, my pick is Caverna the Cave Farmers.
How would you compare Caverna and Odin? Because I feel like they're a similar philosophy in that they are very sandboxy style Euro game. There's lots of different paths that you could pursue. Just go for it. And there's a little feeding element in both of them, but it's a very much permission giving Euro. How did you find the two? Like the comparison between the two?
I think I maybe enjoy a Feast for Odin a little bit more. It's weird, okay? Because I think I maybe enjoyed a Feast for Odin more, but I enjoy the tactile and visual elements of Caverna more, where it's like you've got your actual farm and you've got certain spaces where you can put certain animals,
Yeah.
and then you've got certain rooms that do certain things. So like there are elements that I think I like more in Caverna. But yeah, it's a hard one. I'd probably have to play Caverna again because I played a Feast for Odin twice like this month. So I'd probably want to play Caverna again to actually just decide like which one I liked more. But I really enjoyed a Feast for Odin in the puzzle. But I remember Caverna just liking that building up my own area, my own village, because
Yeah.
actually that is actually a player fantasy for me. Like I played Harmonies on BGA with you guys, and I was like, oh, this game isn't anything special. And then I played it in person. I'm like, oh, I'm building up my little things. I'm building up my houses, my
Yeah.
trees. And I was like, this game's awesome,
Great feeling.
you know? So just that kind of tactile and like the anarchy is right. I love building my castle. So that's just kind of a player fantasy for me. So seeing that in any sort of game is going to put that game higher in my estimation, right?
Yeah. Well, I like both of your picks. I think you both picked really well, but I'm not upset at all about being able to take On Mars, which to me is my favorite Lacerda game. I like a lot of his games. I really like Lisboa as well, but On Mars is my favorite. Now, some people think it's not, but I really do think it's very thematic. I love that there's the whole kind of like cycle of life, how you need water to have plants, then plants produce oxygen, and oxygen allows for people, and the people will allow you to mine goods, and then you'll be able to get water and so on. And there's this kind of like cycle. And it's just, if you want to have a big, heavy Euro game that is really, really thinky, that has interconnected systems, good level of player interaction, a ton of replayability. I mean, you've got hours to spend. This game is great, and it's really immersive. I don't know, just the presentation, having that all set up on the table with Ian O'Toole's art and graphic design. I love the way that he does sci-fi. It's kind of like almost realistic styles. Well, I don't know if it's sci-fi, it's just science, I guess. But yeah, this is a really great game by Vital Lacerda. It's not for everyone. I wouldn't show my mum, wouldn't show my sister, and I wouldn't show my dad, but I would show you guys, and hopefully we'll play it sometime.
Thanks for listening to the Lens and Veil podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Garphill Games. You can follow Garphill Games on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, X, and YouTube by subscribing to our newsletter at garphill.com or by joining the Garphill Discord server. Be an entrepreneur, man. This is an opportunity.
Yeah, this is the best game I've ever designed.
This is in the top 12